It is September 1922. Hitler has been speaking publicly for 2 years. The July speech we analyzed earlier showed us the full conspiracy theory being assembled. The abstract framework of Jewish control, the racial mythology, the call to violence. This speech, delivered less than 2 months later in the same city, is something different and in some ways more alarming. It is the conspiracy theory converted into a policy program. 9 numbered demands delivered from a stage, some of them calling explicitly for expulsion, expropriation, and concentration camps. Hitler is still not in power. He will not be for another decade. But the blueprint of the Holocaust is here, in public, in front of a crowd, in 1922, and nobody stopped it.
Economics is a secondary matter. World history teaches us that no people became great through economics. It was economics that brought them to their ruin. A people died when its race was disintegrated. Germany, too, did not become great through economics. A people that in its own life has lost honor becomes politically defenseless and then becomes enslaved also in the economic sphere. Internationalization today means only Judaization. We in Germany have come to this, that a 60 million people sees its destiny to lie at the will of a few dozen Jewish bankers. This was possible only because our civilization had first been Judaized. The undermining of the German conception of personality by catchwords had begun long before. Ideas such as democracy, majority, conscience of the world solidarity, world peace, internationality of art, etc., disintegrate our race consciousness, breed cowardice. And so today we are bound to say that the simple Turk is more man than we are. No salvation is possible until the bearer of disunion, the Jew, has been rendered powerless to harm.
The opening move here is to dismiss economics as a secondary matter. And this is worth pausing on, because Hitler is speaking to an audience suffering acutely from economic collapse. By declaring economics secondary to race and honor, he is doing something precise. He is telling people whose real problem is material to reframe it as spiritual and racial. This substitution is the engine of the entire speech. The claim that a few dozen Jewish bankers control the destiny of 60 million Germans was, then as now, false. A conspiracy theory with no basis in the documented ownership or governance structures of German financial institutions. The list of corrupting catchwords, democracy, world peace, internationality of art, is equally revealing. These are not presented as ideas to be debated. They are presented as weapons of racial destruction. By the end of this opening paragraph, Hitler has made his conclusion explicit. There is no salvation until the Jew has been.
1. We must call to account the November criminals of 1918. It cannot be that 2 million Germans should have fallen in vain and that afterwards one should sit down as friends at the same table with traitors. No, we do not pardon. We demand vengeance.
The November criminals refers to the politicians who signed the armistice ending World War I in November 1918, a group Hitler and the nationalist right had branded as traitors who stabbed Germany in the back. This was the Dolchstoß Legende, the stab in the back myth, and it was one of the most consequential lies in modern history. The military reality was that Germany had lost the war on the battlefield. By autumn 1918, the army was collapsing, supply lines were broken, and the High Command itself had requested an armistice. The civilian government that signed it did not betray a winning army. They inherited a lost war. But the myth was politically irresistible because it transferred blame from the military to civilians and, crucially, to Jews and socialists. Notice the word Hitler uses here: not justice, not accountability, vengeance. This is not the language of a legal reckoning. It is the language of a purge.
2. The dishonoring of the nation must cease. For betrayers of their fatherland and informers, the gallows is the proper place. Our streets and squares shall once more bear the names of our heroes. They shall not be named after Jews. In the question of guilt, We must proclaim the truth.
This demand operates on two levels simultaneously. The first is symbolic. Streets named after Jews must be renamed, a seemingly minor cultural grievance. The second is lethal. Betrayers of the fatherland belong on the gallows. What connects these two demands is the logic of purification, the idea that German public life has been contaminated and must be cleansed, from street signs all the way to the scaffold. The category of betrayer is of course left undefined and infinitely expandable. In practice, once the Nazis came to power, it would be applied to political opponents, journalists, judges, and anyone deemed insufficiently loyal. The renaming of streets is worth noting as a specific historical fact. After 1933, this demand was systematically implemented across Germany. It was among the first visible signs to ordinary citizens that something fundamental had changed, that public space now belonged to a different definition of us.
3. The administration of the state must be cleared of the rabble which is fattened at the stall of the parties. 4. The present laxity in the fight against usury must be abandoned. Here the fitting punishment is the same as that for the betrayers of their fatherland.
Two demands, both brief, both lethal in their implications. Cleared of the rabble means the purge of the civil service, removing anyone whose loyalty is to a party, a constituency, or the law rather than to the movement. This is the demand for what political scientists call the spoils system taken to its totalitarian extreme, a state apparatus staffed entirely by ideological loyalists. The second demand is more specific. Usury, money lending at high interest, had been an anti-Semitic code word for centuries, and Hitler uses it here as a synonym for Jewish economic activity broadly. The punishment prescribed is the same as for treason, death. He has now, across 4 demands, called for the execution of war-guilt politicians, informers, betrayers, and Jewish financiers. The escalation is deliberate and cumulative. Each demand normalizes the one that follows.
5. We must demand a great enlightenment on the subject of the peace treaty, with thoughts of love? No, but in holy hatred against those who have ruined us. 6. The lies which would veil from us our misfortunes must cease. The fraud of the present money madness must be shown up. That will stiffen the necks of us all.
Holy hatred is one of the most carefully constructed phrases in this speech. The word holy borrows the moral authority of religion and attaches it to hatred, making hatred not just permissible, but sacred, a duty, an act of devotion. This is religious language weaponized for political violence, and it works precisely because it speaks to audiences for whom religious feeling is genuine and deep. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was genuinely punishing. It stripped Germany of territory, imposed enormous reparations, and assigned sole war guilt to Germany, a clause historians widely regard as historically dishonest. Hitler's grievance has a real foundation. What he does with it does not. The treaty's harshness becomes, in his framing, not a political problem to be renegotiated through diplomacy, but a sacred wound demanding holy vengeance. Real injustice, redirected toward eliminationist ends.
7. As foundation for a new currency, the property of those who are not of our blood must do service. If families who have lived in Germany for 1,000 years are now expropriated, we must do the same to the Jewish usurers.
This is the demand for expropriation, the seizure of Jewish property, and it is presented as an act of equivalence and fairness. The rhetorical move is striking. Hitler points to German families being dispossessed by economic collapse and says we must do the same to Jews. He is converting economic desperation into a justification for ethnic theft, framing robbery as justice. The phrase, "those who are not of our blood," is also doing significant work here. It is the first explicit blood-based definition of who does and does not belong to Germany. This is not citizenship, not residency, not cultural integration. It is biology. That definition, once accepted, has no limiting principle. It leads, logically and historically, to the Nuremberg laws of 1935, which codified exactly this distinction into German law.
8. We demand immediate expulsion of all Jews who have entered Germany since 1914, and of all those too who through trickery on the stock exchange or through other shady transactions have gained their wealth.
This is a mass expulsion demand, stated without euphemism. All Jews who have entered Germany since 1914 refers primarily to Eastern European Jews who had fled persecution in the Russian Empire and Poland during World War I. People who had lived in Germany for nearly a decade by the time this speech was delivered. The second category, those who gained their wealth through trickery, is a category so broad and vague as to apply to virtually anyone. Notice what is happening structurally across demands 7 and 8. First property, then persons. Take everything, then remove everyone. This sequence is not accidental. It is the operational logic of ethnic cleansing. Destitution precedes expulsion because a population stripped of property is easier to move, and because those who might otherwise object are silenced by the prospect of inheriting what is left behind.
9. The housing scarcity must be relieved through energetic action. Houses must be granted to those who deserve them. Eisner said in 1918 that we had no right to demand the return of our prisoners. He was only saying openly what all Jews were thinking. People who so think must feel how life tastes in a concentration camp. Extremes must be fought by extremes. Against the infection of materialism, against the Jewish pestilence, we must hold aloft a flaming ideal. And if others speak of the world and humanity, we say the fatherland, and only the fatherland.
The final demand begins with housing, a real, pressing crisis in 1922 Germany, and within 2 sentences has arrived at concentration camps. Kurt Eisner was a Jewish socialist politician who had led a brief revolutionary government in Bavaria in 1918-19 before being assassinated. Hitler invokes him to make a sweeping claim that what Eisner said openly, all Jews were thinking. This is a foundational move of collective guilt. The actions or words of one individual are used to indict an entire people. The call for concentration camps is not metaphorical. By 1922, the concept was already known from the Boer War and from German colonial practices in Namibia. Hitler is calling for their use on German soil, against German citizens, stated explicitly in a public speech, 21 years before Auschwitz reached peak operation. The closing line, not the world and humanity, but the fatherland, and only the fatherland, is the final rejection of Univer. This speech was delivered on September 18th, 1922. Adolf Hitler was a private citizen with no government office, leading a party with fewer than 10,000 members. What he put on the stage that evening was a 9-point program that included street renamings, civil service purges, the execution of political opponents, the seizure of Jewish property, mass expulsion, and concentration camps. All of it spoken aloud, in public, to applause. The distance between this speech and the Nuremberg laws is 13 years. The distance between this speech and the gas chambers is 20 years. None of it was hidden. The program was public, the language was plain, and the audiences were real people who chose to cheer. History does not offer us a mystery here. It offers us a warning that the most dangerous rhetoric is not the kind that shocks. It is the kind that sounds, to enough people in enough pain, like solutions.